Welcome to Conversations with Dez. I'm Dez Blanchfield. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined in the studio by Rod Davison. Rod is the Chief Technology Officer, or CTO, at Scaia AI. Rod, welcome to the show. Great to see you. Thanks for making time to catch up.
Great to be here, Des. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise. So, just initially for our audience, just to set the scene, firstly, thanks for tuning in. We're going to be talking with you, Rod, about Scaia AI, the company, your role as Chief Technology Officer, the key service and solution offerings from Scaia AI, such as your AI advisory and consulting services, your e-discovery solution, and your education and training and certification, and much more. But before we dive into that, Rod, I wonder, could you maybe just give our audience a brief overview of what a day in the life of Rod Davison in the role of CTO at Scaia AI is like currently, and some insight into kind of what your role entails on a day-to-day basis?
One of the things I like about my role is that there is no sort of typical day. Things are always changing and always moving. So it generally divides down into kind of one of two patterns. If I've got a day where I'm really working with a client, doing some training or consulting, then my day is pretty much focused around them. If I'm not working with a client, then I'm in my lab here, studying, working, reading, coding, doing whatever is sort of related to getting a better understanding of the technology, the market, what's going on in the trends. Always take time to break, to go off to the gym, mens sanus in corpore sanus. And then I'm back here. I like to keep a good kind of finger on the pulse of what's going on out there. What are the trends in technology? What's happening in the markets, what's happening culturally as reactions to AI, what are sort of the political issues that are going on, what are the governance and regulatory issues that are happening out there. And I'm also interested in seeing what other people are doing with AI, where it's working, where they're making mistakes, where projects are succeeding, where they're not. My father used to say it's great to learn from your mistakes, but it's a lot better if you learn from other people's mistakes instead. So I think one of the things that we know is that we've got a lot of people out there doing AI. Not all of them are doing it well, and some of them are doing it well. So what we want to do is to say, what distinguishes those two groups? What is it that makes people who are successful at delivering AI solutions successful? What are the factors that they're doing in terms of how they operate their business, how they build their technology, and how does that contrast to people who basically go belly up? So, or have to issue those press releases apologizing for their products. So that's really the focus of my day.
It sounds like an amazing role, and what really what I love from that is that there's a clear balance in the focus on work, but also focus on keeping yourself healthy and fit and well. Because I've always been of a very similar view that if, in my words, I usually say if you don't look after number one, you can't look after everyone else. And I see so many executives just get so burnt and tired
Hmm.
and run out that they just it's so hard for them to support their staff, their customers, and so forth. Well, it sounds like an amazing opportunity. It's the type of thing that most people jump out of bed every day just dying to go to work to. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. I wonder if we could now jump into some of the key topics I wanted to talk about today with you. Starting out with a high-level introduction to Sky AI, the company, because as you know, Rod, we're constantly hearing in the media outlets every day about the supposed explosive growth in demand for successful outcomes with artificial intelligence in various forms by every line of service within business and organizations in essentially every single industry across every market sector around the world. And Scaia AI, in my view, from what I've learned so far, is clearly perfectly placed to help folk deliver successful outcomes with their AI initiatives. So I wonder if you could maybe just kick us off at this point with an overview of where your role fits into sort of, as a CTO into Scaia AI and where you see the company fitting uh, into sort of the broad range of demand from organizations and businesses as a partner with them, such that yourselves work out as a partner of choice in many ways to support them with their endeavors to deliver successful AI services and AI outcomes or solutions. And I guess, sort of how you can help them with undertake those various AI initiatives to just either get started or develop on what they've got so far, and therefore just a general high-level introduction to the company maybe, and then sort of where you see yourselves fitting into that market demand.
I think one of the things that really should be a distinguishing criteria for us versus a lot of other companies is where the focus lies. Right now, when we're looking at all these big AI initiatives, they're focused on technology. We're going to build all this technology and then it's going to do miracles for you. Just deploy this technology and all kinds of wonderful things are going to happen. I think what really we have to do in a company like Scaia is to be customer focused, to say, okay, great, there's all these technologies, but what works for you? What are the problems you need to solve? What are the challenges you've got? Are there things that you just can't do anything within AI because of either regulatory concerns or other concerns? And do you need a big total AI solution? Or maybe what we should look at is where are your pain points? And how can AI work you through those pain points? So I think what we want to really look at here is the distinction. I think Tom Peters made this back in the 1980s, is that companies that were successful and delivered quality were customer focused. And so I think what we need to do is to understand that AI is no different. AI is a product that can produce benefits when it's used to solve problems, create innovation, but it's not just a technology that you deploy and magical things are going to happen. And unfortunately, what I see from a lot of companies is here's a great technology, just deploy it without really understanding what the challenges are an organization faces, and without the organization understanding what the technology could do for them from both a positive and a negative perspective. So I think when you're looking at the kind of the three main thrusts of the company is trying to address that issue. So from my point of view, the first one is the consultancy. The consultancy is really going in, and it's like being a doctor. A patient comes in, they've got symptoms. If I'm a bad doctor, I'm just going to say, great, we'll operate. Well, maybe that's not the right solution. Maybe the guy's a hypochondriac. Maybe there's a drug that he can take. Maybe he just needs to stop smoking. My job as a doctor is to figure out, you've got a problem, I've got a set of tools that can help you. And that is one of the things that you want to do, is to make sure that you understand what's going on. And also with the education part, especially with the executives, start to help them understand the technology from an executives or administrative position so they can understand how it fits into their business. So that does a couple of things there. The other one is the technology. And what we've seen is a massive explosion in hype on large language models. People forget that's not the only AI that's out there. And we have a lot of really successful AI out there, but because it is successful, we don't hear about it. It's now become part of the industries. Things like evolutionary computing. And a part of what we want to do is to not get blinded by the fact that everybody's doing large language models. Therefore, we must do just large language models. It's what are the other ranges of options? I'll just give you an example. PostgreSQL is one of the major database vendors out there, open source database. And all databases do query optimization. What was really interesting when I started really digging down into the nuts and bolts of PostgreSQL is they use AI in query optimization, and they use evolutionary computing to evolve optimal solutions. But nobody knows because it just works and it's there and it gets the job done. And that's the kind of thing we want to keep looking at technologies. What are the technologies that are there? What are the emerging technologies? Neurosymbolic computing. Is that going to provide solutions to problems that things like large language models can't? So that's the other thing that I see myself being responsible for, is really understanding what's going on in the technology. What are the new technologies? And sometimes what are the old technologies that are being successful that we should bring to our clients in addition to the latest and greatest? That's probably generally what I would consider to be my scope. I've probably forgotten something, but what the heck.
Oh, no. Well, we'll recap on a few of those. And in fact, you've mentioned quite a few of the key services I'd like to dive in some of the detail of. But one of the things that really jumped out at me when you were talking about some of the approach there was I had a professor at high school who used to say to me that you shouldn't start solving a problem or writing the first line of code until you can sit down and write in plain English, ideally in one sentence, what you're setting out to do, because otherwise you rush into it and you solution a problem that you haven't documented, or you write code for a program that you don't understand the outcome requirement. And so I did like what you're talking about there with regard to your initial approach of getting in there, having conversations, understanding the requirement, doing the initial advisory and consulting, I think, as you said, a lot of people will just adopt something immediately. And we saw this with, I think, the software as a service element, which we talked about
Mm.
off camera earlier, which is when you saw large software as a service or SaaS solutions come along, and in particularly one CRM platform we won't name because they don't need free advertising. But a lot of people rushed into that offering, not fully understanding the problem they needed in the first place. They just needed a small customer relationship management solution. But they took on the Titanic, or not the Titanic, it's not going to sink, but they took on this massive cruise liner size SaaS thing with everything under the sun. And they spent more of their time and effort and money becoming experts in that platform than actually becoming experts in their business problem.
Mhm.
And then they would run around being very proud that they were experts in the SaaS CRM. And of course, I would ask the question, say, well, how did that map into the requirement you had for the business? And the CEO would look at me going, yeah, that's an interesting question. How do we do that? And then eventually you'd unwind the fact they'd spent 10 times as much time, effort, resource, and money getting a CRM that was so bloated, they often then unwound it and started again. So I like the idea of that initial discussion, the consulting advisory,
Mhm.
because often a lot of companies, I'm sure you will agree, they don't even have a language or a vocabulary with which to describe the AI challenge they're facing, let alone the expertise to then come in. And talking to your CEO, Mark Kirsten, the other day, one of the things that really jumped out and that you touched on there was in that consulting and advisory, if you're an airline or a bank or a transport or education or logistics company, that's your core business. You are not an AI company. You're not a development company. You're not a database company. You're not a training company or e-discovery company. And you should never pretend to be that because that's not your core business and strength. And if you start pretending you're an AI company for an airline, then airplanes start falling out of the sky, which is not ideal. But I'd love to dive into some of those services and solutions that you touched on in particular, because earlier in the week, I spent a lot of time just going through your company website looking for some key notes around this. And just going through, it was clear to me that Scaia AI offered a really broad range of key AI-related business and technology services and solutions. So much so that I actually recommend our audience do just that. Just jump online and go to Scaia AI. It's SCAIA.ai. We'll have a link to it wherever you see this video. And just peruse the website and see the breadth and depth of the capability from the people and the expertise and the experts and the scientists and the developers and the consultants, the engineers, through to the actual platforms and tools. I would like all of our audience to do just as I do, to go and visit the website, learn more about the organization and the offerings. But I wonder if we could, for a very, very quick moment, Rod, just look at some of those core offerings. And in particular, your AI consulting and advisory you spoke about. I'd love to just come back to a couple of questions on that. Then your overall e-discovery solution, which I think for many organizations is a really good first step with regard to getting a successful outcome, particularly a proof of concept, because I'm sure you'll agree that most companies, when they go into AI initiatives, have potentially not mapped out all their data, all their digital assets, and therefore they start to feed them into AI, not knowing what's in there. And then I'd like to wrap up with your training, education, and certification, because I think that's a really critical element as well that companies often overlook. Maybe let's just start, for example, in your AI and consulting and advisory. You touched on it, but could you maybe just give us a slightly more detailed overview of kind of what Scaia AI can offer customers in the way of the AI consulting and advisory services, particularly from the first point of contact where they not necessarily AI experts and want to lean on you and your team there at Scaia AI to help them understand from an advisory point of view, as you said, is this the problem we need to solve? And if so, what's the business benefit? And then the consultant to come in and map out some of those programs of work and the technology required.
That that's a very important aspect, I think, of what we do. And I think that by focusing on that initially, what we do is we improve the probability of successful projects, deployments, and implementations by orders of magnitude instead of just jumping in with the product. And so when we're talking about the consultancy, there are a couple of different dimensions you have to look at. Is first of all, we have to de-hype a lot of the AI stuff. And I've spent a lot of my career doing this with various products. Salespeople would come and sell some big, impressive product. And then they would complain it's not doing what the salesperson said. I would tear the product apart, go back in and say, sorry, it will never do what the salesman told you it'll do. And it was this kind of like, yeah, we kind of figured that at this point. But what we want to do is do the de-hyping because there is so much hype, particularly on people who are selling solutions, that we want to say, look, let's get realistic about it. This is what AI is. This is what we know it can do based on what we've seen in terms of past successes. And these are places where it really doesn't seem to be giving any solutions. So that is an educational part at a high level to people so they understand the field. Associated with that is what are people in your industry also doing with AI? Where is it seeming to fit into your industry as a whole? It's going to be very different in banking as versus retail versus software development. So what you have to do is to say for your industry, what are the kinds of solutions that are people are currently doing, and what are the outcomes that they're experiencing? Is there a lot of buyer's regret? Are they seeing improvement in performance? And then what you want to do is take a look at the organization itself and say, what are your business objectives? And this is something that we used to do all the time with data mining. Before we start mining data, what is it you want it to do for you? What do you want as an outcome? Can you give me your business objectives? Why are you doing AI? And if you can't figure that out, then let's help you figure that out. Let's go through that strategic planning process and say, do we need to go to AI because we're afraid we're going to lose market share because everybody else is going to AI? Is that part of the equation that we have to consider? Are we going to AI just because some people are going to AI? Well, maybe that's something else we have to consider. So the idea is you want to make sure at the consultancy level that you get an integration with their business in terms of their strategic vision, their operations, and what the technology can do to enhance or improve that or to help them innovate in certain areas. One of the things that, as a result of that, we may have to walk away and say, sorry, there's just no place here. Now, I've done this with a couple of companies, not with AI, but other technologies, and so the technology is great, but your company is so badly run and disorganized, you're never going to be able to implement. Your problems are not technology. You should probably fire a few people and, start to hire some other people. Those are, I think when you get to a point where you're going to make a sale rather than tell the truth, you start to erode your credibility as a consultant or an advocate in the area. And I think you have to be afraid, not be afraid to criticize technologies and give people a realistic picture. The second thing is that you want to help them develop their strategic plan. So how are we going to do it in AI? As you mentioned, a couple of things that are very important. Are we going to train on our data? Well, wait a minute. Do we have regulatory concerns we have to look at? Do we have privacy concerns? What about our data quality? Is our data sitting in a bunch of Word documents? Or are we going to have to do some kind of data extraction? What kind of investment are we going to have to make in infrastructure in order to do this? And what kind of benefits are we expecting to get from this? A very typical case we look at is where people want to be able to use all of their information, assets, and intelligence in an organization, but it's all stuck in documents and spreadsheets. Well, it becomes almost impossible to do anything manually. But if we can train models on your data in there, we can start to at least be able to query that mass of unreachable data. But at the same time, we have to point out to them that if you make it queryable, other people could query it too. So now we got to think about security and we've got to think about all those other things. So what you want people to do is to, as a result of the consultancy, at least develop, okay, this is something we think we'd like to try. Here's what we'd like to do. Here's our short-term plans, our long-term plans. Here's how we're going to assess how successful it is. At some point, we're going to have to make a decision. Sometimes we're just going to cut line and say, there's no fish here. And sometimes we're going to say, hey, this is working, we want to scale up, which comes back to the e-discovery solution you're looking at. There is a way to actually go in and start to get some quantitative feedback on how good or how bad this is going to perform in their environment. And it's got to be a realistic estimate. I spent a lot of years in testing and quality assurance, and I'm always big on saying, yeah, but is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? So that's kind of the advocacy and consulting is really helping at not just the educational, but the planning level. Sometimes that does involve, sitting down and doing some serious strategic thinking. And helping them develop at least a plan or looking at their existing plans and saying, okay, this is good, but ooh, this may not work out the way you expect it to. and let's go through that. You know, this may require, you may have to hire a bunch of lawyers if you do this kind of approach. So that's really, I think that that first part is really about getting people up to speed on it. It's just like you can just imagine if somebody shows up in say Sydney, and they've spent their entire life living in remote Australia. They've never seen electricity. They've never seen running water. And you suddenly drop them in the middle of Sydney. Somebody's going to have to show them how it works. That doesn't mean they're stupid. That doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It
Mm,
just
mm.
means this is something that's new to them. And that's what our job is we've got a lot of people being dropped into this, is new to them. And what we want to do is demystify, dehype it. Also give them some critical skills so that when they start to get exposed to all the other AI, they can kind of skeptically look at it and go, that doesn't sound right to me, or that sounds good, and have a little bit of a basis for making that kind of judgment. So that's what I think that first one is. Like I said, that e-discovery fits into there because you can use it as the basis for control studies, trials. Let's see how it works on a small subset of the data. Let's see if that would actually wind up giving you benefits down the road. And I think generally, once we start to see that kind of e-discovery going and they can start to see it, then that opens up the door for more strategic thinking. Oh, if it does this, we could do this and this and this. And then you start to work through the additional processes of where they can start to leverage this to ease up some of their pain points and also maybe to do things they weren't able to do before. So I think that's really
Yeah.
the main point of that first consultancy is just really getting them up to speed on it and doing it in such a way that we're not trying to sell them something. No, that's I think important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, for a lot of organizations and certainly for our audience today, I'd like them to take away this idea based on what you just said there that, you know, assume that you need a partner of choice like Scaia AI who has the expertise, has the experience, has the knowledge, has the capability of tools to actually be that sort of bolted at the hip AI expert that you need. Because if you are a transport company, if you're an education company, if you're a state or federal government agency, your core business is not AI solutions. That's not what you do. And as we saw with big data and analytics and data science and cloud and a whole bunch of other things, people rushed into it. And invariably, as you alluded to earlier, they may not get the successful outcomes they want, and then they're surprised. And then people like us turn around and say, well, did you do some initial advisory work to understand and scope out what you're looking for from a business benefit? Did you get some initial
Mhm.
consulting to map out the business systems and the gaps? And as you said, what have you done around data mapping and data discovery and e-discovery and cybersecurity? And then they sort of get this quizzical look on their face going, oh, no, we didn't consider that. It's like, well, let's find you the right partner of choice, such as Sky AI, with that expertise, because Scaia AI would not go and try and run an airline. That's not their core business. And similarly, an airline shouldn't try and run large AI projects. That's not to say they don't have the ability to learn and train and hire new people, but I think there's often a desire to rush into getting a tick in the box, but it's just a rush into a failure often. And I think this is
Yeah.
where it's so critical that people like yourselves and your team there at Sky AI can help them with that early advisory, just in plain English conversation, as it were, and then the consultancy element at every level of business around in their language, their vocab, their core business, but with the AI expertise. And
Yeah.
as you said, it may even be that a system is running and already using machine learning or some other tools to optimize what it's doing, and they're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Um, you touched on e-discovery a number of times, and I wonder if we could just circle back a little bit on that because I think it's such a critical element. And you did mention one thing that I'd like to just highlight for our audience, and that is that when we go from that sort of early advisory piece of work you do, and then the supporting consulting, and as you said, potentially get some roadmaps and some plans, and potentially some business cases mapped out, some cost models approved, and then
Mm.
some roadmaps and planning and strategic direction on that. Even something as simple as a AI strategy document that the board can sign off and approve, and the CEO can put up on the intranet for everyone to understand what is our strategic direction. Mapping that data, I think for me, and I'd love to get your take on this, but I certainly feel that we agree on this based on what you just said, was it is so critical to know where your digital assets are, either virtually, physically, or logically, to know what those assets are. So not only where they are and what they are, but also you touched on the security element, which is who's got access currently and should they have it, and who do we need to give access to and should they have that? Why do they need
Mhm.
that? What type of access? Particularly payroll data, for example, if you're training on that. We don't want everyone to know what everyone else is earning, but we do want to anonymize that data so we can do some work on it. We might have client data. You might have one part of the business does finance and the other part does tax consulting, and they can't both be working on the same client data. There's a conflict of interest in compliance. So when you go through that process, I think again, when you touched on e-discovery, I wonder if you could maybe just tell us a little bit more of the detail around your e-discovery offering, because I know this is something that every single executive that we speak with, they tell us they are constantly facing challenges with not just e-discovery, but in particular related to their AI initiatives. And I'd love to learn sort of more about where your e-discovery is currently helping organizations in their efforts, particularly with the AI initiative focus, but more so generally in discovering the digital assets, mapping them, understanding them. And again,
Mm.
maybe even finding some risks in there where maybe they're introducing bias unintentionally and so forth. 30,000 sort of foot view of your e-discovery offering, if you could, and then maybe we can dive into a couple of the specific details.
Well, e-discovery is a way of basically making data queryable in a certain sense at the high level approach. And that, as you pointed out, raises a couple of interesting. You're basically training models on your data, okay, which is important. One of the big, as you were talking earlier, reminded of Nicholas Worth's comment many years ago about writing software applications, and he said, first solve the problem, then build the application. And I think that is kind of a good summary of what we're doing here. But I'm also just going to point out, I spent from about 1990 to right up to the present, I spent a lot of my time consulting. Was on Wall Street for a period of time. And a lot of what we did was looked at how, as you were saying, big banks, defense contractors, large retailers, insurance companies were actually implementing technology that was emerging. And one of the things I was always fascinated by is how are these companies using technology? How are they deploying it? And what often I would be working with the IT people, and the question they would ask me is, what were they thinking when they said we're going to do this? And that got me really interested in that disconnect between the reality of the IT world in a place like Walmart or Sears, which is a big retailer, or like a large bank, uh, in the executive suite, and versus the people that are on the ground trying to make these things happen. So that's always been a passion of mine because I always kind of side with the IT guys and say, yeah, what were they thinking? Somebody should have told them. And I've done a number of advanced technology courses, and as the senior IT guys are in the room, they say, our manager should be here. They need to know this. So I think that goes back to that. Now, the e-discovery is a proof of concept. In other words, can we actually do this with our data? And what are the capabilities that we can do with this? And as you've also pointed out, there's issues about data that are going to come up as we do this. Are you ready to go to this? Or is there some background work you're going to have to do? Can we do some initial analysis of your data quality? Can this integrate? How is this going to integrate with your business processes? How it's great that you can query your data, but what are you going to query it for? And who should query it? These are security issues, as you pointed out. We've got all this financial information on our bank. Should we have tellers being able to query it? This is a big scandal right now with data in the policing industry. You've got these criminal databases, and you've got police officers querying them to stalk ex-girlfriends. Um, and that has resulted in a lot of criminal charges. Now, the point is that when you put it in place, it's, oh, they would never misuse it. Well, there's always a few people out there, most police officers don't, but there's that small percentage that are going to do it. Well, how does that relate to your organization? Is it going to be that one person that's maybe getting a little bit of money from somebody else to kind of look stuff up that he shouldn't be looking up? So yeah, as we go into e-discovery, then you start to make something concrete. And you can also say, look, now that we're doing this, how's it going to be used? If we scale this up, what are the questions and issues it's posing? What are the benefits? So, and again, then you have to look at, well, how would you keep it current? If we're going to retrain the model, we have things in AI called model drift and concept drift, or data drift and concept drift. And these things are the AI has to constantly be kind of go back to night school, so to speak. How are we going to do that? How are we going to figure out the organization? So, but once you've got a tangible working prototype, you're actually able to start addressing some of the issues and also start to think about how you can use it. So you can think of it as being sort of like a an idea generator, but also a something that you're going to use to sniff up potential problems, and also something that you're going is going to be an indicator of where things aren't working that you need to work. Before an organization makes a massive capital investment in something, that's not going to work. You want to be able to do that. So,
Yeah.
and you can do all the theorizing you want, but it's when you're sitting in front of there working on the product, working on your data, that you start to realize, okay, so this makes it tangible. So I think it's not a revolutionary piece of technology like it's a brand new machine learning model or something. Instead, it's more of a really practical application of it that is targeted towards getting people up to speed on it and really seeing, is this a good fit for me? And then from there, you can look at scaling up, which is exactly what the company does, scalable AI. Once we've got getting that kind of nugget of success, how do we build on that? How do we scale that up? And what are the other things that we can do? Um, I think this is very much goes along with the whole idea of design thinking, where you basically immerse yourself in the problem, you propose a solution, you prototype it, you evaluate it, you test it, and you do it again. And I think using e-discovery gives us access to that kind of evolutionary model of product development. Does that kind of
Yeah, that's
answer your question?
perfect. Absolutely. And if I was to summarize it and do my best to do that, going back to the initial idea, when you get in there from a consulting advisory point of view, people are often looking for that early quick win. It's like, what business case can we pull together to then go and get a cost model approved and signed up to get the funding to bring you in and do some work with us to get us up to speed and help us develop a language and a vocab, help us discover some of the assets, find some of the challenges we can get some business benefits from. And I love the idea that your e-discovery process touches so many different things with a positive aspect in that you're mapping out the data assets you've got, potentially finding some gaps, you're finding some data that might be at risk, you might find some cybersecurity and access issues. But you're also then, and you touched on this, and what I would describe as a conversation starter, you describe as an idea discovery or starter, being able to then use that as sort of the seed, if you like, you plant to go, well, we've now found these data sets, we've found this value. If you take X and do Y, you get Z, and that's a business benefit. I think it's such a great approach to sort of come in early and make that e-discovery like a proof of concept platform, as you've highlighted, because it's such a critical element of knowing what assets you can work with and all those things you touched on. And so for audience, I highly recommend that once you've had a look around to learn about Scaia AI, and I love the name Scalable AI, is to quite literally just reach out very early on and start that conversation. Because as you said, it does create ideas, it creates conversations, allows us to go, well, we just found this, what can we do with it? Or better yet, what shouldn't we do with it? Or what is someone doing with it currently, and should they be doing that? There's so many easy, quick wins in that I think senior executives can get back to the board and saying, we've run these 2 or 3 initiatives with Scaia AI. We've had some great outcomes, found some good business benefits, hasn't cost us an arm and a leg. We now have a very long list of other ones that we can consider that they've helped us when they're at consulting advisory. We want to propose we do these things over a stage period of time, can we have some funding? And I think that type of approach is one of the many things I've seen with regard to not just AI solutions, that's, as you said, alluded to before, with regard to successful outcomes. Understand the problem you're trying to solve, find the business benefits, and then run the process. Underpinning all of that, one of the third elements that really jumps out at me with regard to capabilities and services and offers and solutions, et cetera, that Scaia AI has, and right across the board, we're hearing a huge demand for this. The learning services as organizations are under significant pressure to get both their staff and all others around and so forth educated with the appropriate skills and training and certifications at the very end, the formal certifications, to be ready, willing, and able to actually adopt and leverage all things AI successfully. And I'd love to delve into those sort of around the training, education, and the certification. Maybe you can just walk us through the very, very high level 30,000-foot view of kind of what you currently offer in training, education, certification, and we can sort of dive into a couple of areas where that's really able to help organizations get from where they are now to the first few steps on their journey with an AI solution and getting started with AI.
Well, I've been working with Mark on delivering various kinds of training solutions for years now. It's only recently that I've also joined him in the AI company. But there are a couple of different things that I have found are lacking kind of in the AI knowledge sphere. And very often, one of the things that happens is we get people who are using AI tools and toolkits who really not too sure what they're doing. And I taught one course on neural nets to a company. They'd been using neural nets. None of the programmers had any idea what a neural net was.
Oh
All they
no.
knew is if you open up TensorFlow and you put these values in and you put it out, you get a neural net. And when I actually went through it, a lot of comments were, so is that what we're actually doing? Yeah. And the reason that's important to know is what you're actually doing is how do you know you're doing it right?
Yeah.
And how do you know what the quality is? And if you're working with a non-standard problem, how do you tweak it? How do you make the adjustments to your particular environment? So, in addition to teaching AI to executives and managers, we also have to look at really the practical side of it. So that involves training around. I just did a course on DAMA, the Data Association Book of Knowledge. And with a whole bunch of data consultants at a government company, a government organization. And we had a lot of time explaining what governance is. And they said, so governance is, I said, who's responsible for making sure you're not breaking the rules? And they said, well, nobody actually. And I said, well, these are things you've got to look at. So the training is going to be not just in AI, machine learning, neural nets, transformers, large language models, and all of the cool toys. It's also got to be training in the infrastructure. How do you set up a machine learning pipeline? How do you do data engineering? How do you do data quality? How do you assess the results of your training sets? Are you going to, and we see, of course, we have a lot of problems. Just an announcement the other day, Apple pulled its news summarization service because it was summarizing things wrong. That should have been picked up long before that was put into production, which implies that somebody's falling down on the QA function this. So sometimes we have to go in and get them going on the QA function. We don't know our business objectives. Well, then let's look at business analysis techniques. So the offering set, at least what I've been doing for the last 20 years, is looking at all these different dimensions. So, I go in I've got developers say we have to get the business objectives. We don't like talking to executives because they're scary. And say, okay, well, let's get some business analysis going here and work on that. Or like I said, people who have to deal with data who are just used to pushing buttons because that's all they've ever had to do. But suddenly they've got these new responsibilities. They have to know about data, like what is, and often things like cloud storage. So what are we going to do with all this data? And the executives say, put it in the cloud. And everybody looks at themselves and goes, what does that mean? So what you're looking at from an educational perspective is number one, the core education is AI. And for me, that's the fun stuff to teach. I love teaching AI because it's just for me, it's so fascinating. But the other stuff is just as critical. You've got to bring the other stuff up as well, so that you understand data engineering and how to manage a data lake. All this data is coming in. How do we do it? How do we do mass data storage? How do we query this data? How do we get it into a form that we can use for machine learning? How to maintain our data sets? How do we version our models? A lot of these things have to be trained as well. It's just not a matter. Nobody's born with an instinct to do it right. It's
Yeah.
not like eating or walking. These are things that you really have to work in an organization. And so that I think the educational component is not just about here's a machine learning model, go. It's about here's a machine learning model, and here's all the other skills that you need that are around this. Where do you rank on those? What's your self-assessment? The idea, I think, of certification, I really like the idea that it gives a standard. I don't think certification should be given for just going to a course. I think certification should be given to show that you went to the course and you learned what was in the course. Now we haven't done this at Sky, but some of the certifications I've done in the past when we've done this, is to actually have people have to do something and to show that not only can they regurgitate what they heard in class, but they can apply it to do something. And they say, yeah, look, you demonstrated you can apply that. So I don't think certification should be easy because then they demean the value of the certification. So I want that certification to mean something. So if somebody says they've got a Sky certification in machine learning models, they know machine learning models and maybe specialization from a developer perspective or specialization from a data engineer's perspective. But that when somebody looks at that certification, they have trust in what that person actually knows. And I think that's important when we're talking about certifications.
Absolutely. It's almost a Um, someone once described certification as like a gold standard, which they kind of smirked at because they imagined the little gold stamp at the end of the piece of paper.
Yeah.
But I think it also brings a significant amount of weight and gravitas in that, as you said, it's one thing to sit there and look at YouTube style videos and just sort of understand the basic concepts so you can have a conversation. It's a very different thing to go through the training, through the education, the hands-on practical, and then be challenged at the end with a process, whether it's physical or
Mhm.
virtual, and then be tested to actually be able to demonstrate that they actually understand what they learned and they can put it into practice. And only then, quote unquote, be certified as trained and educated.
Yeah.
And also take away a certificate, an actual physical or potentially virtual PDF certificate that they can either print out and frame and put on the wall. I don't think anyone would spend 5 years doing a law degree at university if they didn't actually not only become certified and get the job, but also get a plaque they can put in the wall and go, yeah, well, all those years, that's my icon to show I did it. I know a lot of staff we talk to are very reluctant to just do what they would call time-killing training, where they have to tick the box and just consume the content. So someone in management and going, yeah, we've trained all our staff, versus actually doing something they enjoy and are engaged in and come out the end and go, well, I've actually been certified and trained on this now. I can actually do it. And not it, but I can take it with me to my next job potentially, because we're not always going to stay in the same job. We're going to move companies. But more importantly, the board then and the senior executives can talk to themselves and their own organizations and line of business and potentially their customers and the business partners saying, our team is not only trained and educated, they are certified. Someone has validated that they did the training, they understand the concepts. And I think this is something that's so significant that you offer. It's such a key point of differentiation that I really want our audience to take away from this, that when you get into an AI initiative, it's so important to go to someone like Scaia AI and not just do the training and education, but go through that full certification process. Demonstrate you did actually get the concepts, so you understand it, you can put it in practice. Because I think if you can't do that and come away with the Scaia AI style certification, you shouldn't really be working on it in the first place when you go back to your desk in the office and whatnot, because you probably don't understand the first place because you couldn't be certified. And then you're almost a risk to the business because you're running around like a loose cannon, not fully prepared and capable and trained and certified and able to do it. And then, problems arise that you've got to fix up later. I was very keen to kind of pivot to just a final question for, if I could, with regard to well, we talked about a lot of things with regard to the customer engagement piece, but if we could sort of step back and say, what does a typical customer engagement look like through the lens of your role in particular as CTO? How would you summarize what a typical customer engagement looks like? And from an ideal scenario, obviously, because there's a million variations, but
Mhm.
in an ideal world, in your words, what do you think a typical customer engagement looks like from the initial contact through to the early consulting and advisory, as you touched on, then things like design and development, maybe some trials or proof of concepts for the e-discovery, as you touched on, and then getting a final working solution for a particular problem implemented and then deployed, maybe handed over to the customer. And then I guess maybe just any of the ongoing work with potential support, ongoing education, operational support, maintenance support, upgrades, etc. In an ideal world for our audience, just so they can sort of take it away and understand what it might look like when they come and have a conversation with you about some of the initiatives they want to run, particularly with AI focused. What in an ideal world would that customer engagement look like with you, and what should they be planning for and expecting to prepare with to come along and be fully ready to have a conversation and go through an engagement with you?
I think the very first step is going to be, is this a good fit? In other words, um, maybe you shouldn't be talking to us. You may have what you're looking for is not within our scope of expertise. you should really be talking to somebody else. Or at your particular point in your business, you are way too far away from doing AI. Maybe you're running a small operation and it's just not something that you're really going to get any benefit from. Let's not waste your time. Let's not waste our time. And I've had to go into this. I've gone into organizations. We want to do AI and or similar kinds of technologies, and then you take a look at their management structure and realize that it is this hierarchical waterfall management structure. A lot of times people don't do agile and things like that, and I just tell them it's not going to work because your management system will not allow this kind of operation to function in this corporate environment. So the first thing we have to do is to know whether or not it's going to be beneficial for the client to actually continue with us. That's got to be the first step. If you get past that first step, and generally, hopefully, the people that are showing up on our doorsteps, so to speak, are the kinds of people we want to be engaged with. The second thing is to do the education part, which is a two-way street. I want to learn about you. I want to know what's going on in your organization. What's your business like? What's your technological capabilities? What have you done in the past? I want to, just like when I used to go in and do all this consulting with all these banks and everything, the first part was just saying, show me your data center. Show me what you're working. Where's your code base? What are your programmers doing? Show me the workflows. You start to get a good idea of what the customer is doing. How does your business work? I don't do your business. So tell me about your business. Let's get a map from our side of what your business is. Now, on your side, the engagement is this is what people in your industry are doing. These are the kinds of solutions that are out there. This is the terminology. This is the landscape. This is the hype. This is the reality. And we're getting that initial kind of, we now start to be able to have a common dialogue because we understand each other. So if I'm working with somebody from the oil industry and they start talking about the oil industry, I better understand what they're talking about. And I think we noticed in Mark's text, so he went and got an online law degree to do that. That's the kind of thing we have to dedicate ourselves to do. And that's one thing I love doing. I used to love going into all of these companies and say, so you make helicopters. Cool. Show me how you make helicopters. And I would be in heaven because these guys would take me through the factory and here, put on the hard hat. We're going on the floor, and then you start to understand, from our point of view, from the technology, what are the problems that you guys are encountering in helicopter making that we can help you with? You make jet engines, or you do financial transactions, or you do capital investment. What is it that you're doing, and what are people in your industry doing? Is there AI? So there's the idea of that mutual learning. Then you want to go, and the third stage is do some kind of assessment. Give them the tools to start assessing the state of their organization. And if they need help, we come in and help them do that. What's your level of data maturity? Do you even know where your data is? What's the skill sets that your people have? Or are you process mature, or are people just running around doing whatever and fighting fires? That's probably means that there's some work to be done before you can put an AI solution in place. So the idea is you want to get an assessment, and from that assessment, say, let's pick a pilot project that we can actually focus on. Let's see if you guys can manage an AI project in terms of what resources and infrastructure you have, and we'll guide you through it. And then let's do that initial study and let's evaluate the study. Now that we've been through that initial project, what are some of the issues that have been raised? Have we now start thinking about regulatory compliance? So we start thinking about, particularly in the AI world, there's a lot of blowback on companies that deploy AI because they deploy it badly. There's business risk involved. Adobe's given us a perfect example of saying, oh, we're just going to train our AI, whatever you guys do in our products, and a massive blowback from the community on that one. And we're seeing that. So we've got to say, do you understand that? Do you understand the legal issues, the marketing issues? Now, once you've got that sort of proof of concept, they say, okay, now let's start thinking in terms of a rollout. What can we do? What other kinds of solutions should we look at? And so what you want to do is you want to take that engagement in a step by step. You want to make sure that you pass each level before you move on to the other one. Like I said, we don't want to waste the customer's time. We don't want to waste their money. And we don't want to waste our time. So at some point, we may have to say, you know what? Your strategic vision is great, but you guys just don't have the data to be able to train a model. So maybe we have to look at you guys doing a data collection and retention a project first before you jump into trying to use that data to train a model. Then what happens is you want them to again deploy it, and again we know that you deploy things out in doing your pilot studies, cost benefit analysis, and then the other thing you want to put into place, which I think gets missed a lot of times, is the quality assurance and the quality control. Over time, are we consistently what is the quality of the results we're getting? Are those changing over time? Is that degrading? What do we have to do to maintain that? How do we build the support infrastructure? How do we respond to changes in the regulatory environment? How do we respond to changes in technology? Gee whiz, was it Stargate was just announced, $500 billion in AI technology. How is that going to impact our long-term strategic direction and our strategic plans? And then we can do an assessment of kind of like, well, let's look at the various scenarios and options. So you want to give the client also the capability to manage their own AI evolution so that they develop the in-house skills to be able to do the quality assurance, the planning, the adoption of new technology, and the response to the market, regulatory, and other pressures. So it's just a matter of going through that kind of engagement. And like I said, at each step of the engagement, you have to make a go, no-go decision. Maybe the company would be a great candidate for AI, but they're just not ready to do the work that's needed to get the benefits from it. Maybe there's other stuff they have to do first. Or maybe we discover in the process that they're going to run smack into some mean regulatory barriers, which may derail their efforts unless we go back and rethink that. So there's a lot of these
Yeah.
kinds of dimensions we want to do it. So the idea is it's kind of like growing a child in a certain sense. You're giving them a set of capabilities at each stage, which build on the previous stage until they become self-sufficient. Because we're not going to be able to handhold our clients forever. What we want to do is maybe, continue to work with them, but not at an operational level. Like maybe they want a new initiative, we can come in and help them with that. They want to do something else. They want to change of direction. They want to do some external consulting. Great. But we can't be the ones running their operation on a day-to-day basis. So we have to train them to do it themselves. And also to give them the tools to do the necessary quality and analytics to say, are we doing it right? Are we getting benefit? And what are the metrics that they're going to be using? So all of those things, I think, are sort of the engagement that we'd be
Fantastic.
looking at.
Yeah, in many ways, what really jumped out at me there is that not only can you do the full end-to-end solution for them, but it seems to me that you're also well positioned to be able to actually do things in stage gates and sort of say, well, let's do one thing and prove it works and then move to the next thing and do it in logical steps that aren't sort of a big bang, everything solved at once approach, which often sinks many organizations because they put all their money and resource into it and it doesn't actually come out the way they want. And then they have no money left to do any other projects versus building over time, as I said, growing a child, giving it small steps to work for, and then
Yeah.
crawl, and then walk, and then jog, and then sprint, and then run. Well, Rod, it's been fantastic to chat with you. It is abundantly clear, in my opinion, Rod, that you and the team there at Scaia AI have everything any organization could ever want or need to help them achieve their goals, not only getting started with AI, but also ongoing success leveraging AI in the short, medium, and long term. I wonder, Rod, if you could just quickly wrap us up with how folk can get in touch with you and the team there at Scaia AI to do just what we've been talking about today, to start a conversation with you and look at and learn how you and your team of experts there at Scaia AI can help them and their organization, quote unquote, get started with AI or continue to take advantage of and leverage AI in general. With regard to what we discussed today and around your overall service and solutions, what's the ideal next step for people to do? We mentioned visiting your website at scaia.ai. That's SCAIA.ai, which we'll have a link to wherever you see this video. what are the best ways for them to reach out with you, set up a conversation and a time and a date to sort of get an initial meeting going and then take steps from there?
I think the best way is through the website,
Hmm.
the contact information there. Simply because I find if we give out other kinds of contact information that might change, email addresses, and somebody's watching the video and going, but the emails keep bouncing. But if you go to the website, the contact information will be there. And it's also going to be guaranteed that you're going to actually get it to somebody. Whereas, if you're phoning and nobody's there to answer the phone or whatever, it's a bit frustrating. But the idea is, yeah, go to the website, look at the contact links there, the email, the forms, and just get in touch. And then from there, you establish other mechanisms of communication.
Fantastic. Well, we do advise everyone who has tuned in so far and anyone who watches on demand later on, please do exactly that. Reach out, go to Scaia AI's website. As I said, we'll have a link to it wherever you see this. We want you to learn more about the company. We would like you to reach out to them through their contact form on their website to set up a date and a time to have a conversation, even if just to introduce yourselves and get to know kind of what they can do for you in the short to medium term and then potentially long term. Get to have a conversation with Rod, Mark, the founder, and the rest of the team. Map your team to their team and get relevant expertise across the technology development and engineering consulting, talking at the same time, and just get a foot in the door and just start doing some projects, get some initiatives up and running, get some wins that you can take back to the management team and the board, and show where you can get business benefits for your own organization or potentially for your customers and improve their customer experience or other things or reduce risk, whatever it might be. Rod, thanks so much for making time. It's been absolutely great to get to know you a bit better, learn more about your role there as Chief Technology Officer, get all of your insights from your lens and your point of view in the world with regard to the company and capabilities. I look forward to having you back on the show again soon to dive into a slightly more detail on some of these verticals. But in the meantime, stay safe. Really appreciate your time. And I look forward to hearing some of the success stories as people reach out, as we've invited them to see where you're helping them with what they're looking to achieve in their organizations.
Well, thanks, Des. It's been fun. As you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. So anytime you want to have a chat, you know where to find me.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Rod.